All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I see that some of you are still joining us over in the main stage, but I just want to take the time to welcome you to the first annual Women in STEM Breaking Barriers Summit. My name is Maggie Fox, and I'm this year's summit coordinator. I wish I honestly could express to you how excited I am for today and how proud I am of the work that this planning committee has done over the last few months. But all I can really say is whether you're just here with us today or you're here with us for all 3 days, you're in for an amazing lineup of events. Before I get started sharing some of the information about today, the Planning Committee of WeSTEM at UCLA want to acknowledge our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino and Tongva peoples. We also want to state that this committee stands against all forms of violence, racism, and discrimination of any kind. We condemn the increasing acts of violence against the Asian American, Pacific Islander, and Black communities. This conference is an inclusive, respectful space and should be treated as such. The summit as a whole was created with the needs and wants of women in STEM in mind. We hope that by the end of this summit, or for however long you decide to stay with us, you are able to walk away feeling you learned something and leave with a renewed sense of community. So with that in mind, we encourage you to take advantage of the sessions we have throughout the next few days, the community room spaces over in the exhibition booth section of the platform, and the intersectionality discussions and fireside chats that will happen at the conclusion of each day. So learn something new, meet someone you wouldn't have otherwise, and together, let's work to break the barriers women face for being part of STEM and just for being a woman. We ask that you respect all of our speakers over the next few days and your fellow summit goers. If at any time you need help, please reach out to any of us labeled as part of the planning committee, and we will be more than happy to help you. Before I introduce Amy Murthy to proceed with the opening remarks, I do want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. So thank you to the Society of Women Engineers, the UCLA Organization for Cultural Diversity in Science, the Graduate Society of Women Engineers at UCLA, the Graduate Women in Computer Sciences at UCLA, UCLA Infuse Program, the Engineering Graduate Student Association, and the UCLA Department of Physics and Astronomy. We also want to thank our planning groups, who were the previously mentioned groups, in addition to the UCLA Society of Women Geoscientists, UCLA Women Plus in the Physical Sciences, UCLA Advancing Women, and UCLA Advancing Women in Science and Engineering. Lastly, I promise I'm almost done with all the thank yous. We do want to thank the UCLA School of Engineering and Applied Science for their support and their help with promoting this event. And we want to give a special thank you to the UCLA College of Physical Sciences for the use of their Hoping platform to host the summit in the first place, and their help and support throughout this whole planning process. I think that was everyone that we wanted to thank, but the planning committee also wanted to take a second to thank everybody in attendance today. We can plan this event, but if we didn't have the support and interest of others who want to push forth this cause, this work really wouldn't mean anything. So thank you for coming. Now, without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce our opening speaker, Dr. Jayathi Murthy. So Jayathi Murthy is the Ronald and Valerie Sugar Dean of the Henry Samueli School of Engineering and Applied Science at the University of California, Los Angeles. She is the first female dean in the school's 75-year history. And in 2020, she was elected to the National Academy of Engineering, which is among the highest professional honors granted to an American engineer. As dean, she has prioritized expanding access to a UCLA engineering education by recruiting underrepresented minority students and faculty and establishing WE at UCLA to encourage women in engineering. Murthy's recent research has addressed submicron thermal transport, multi-scale multi-physics simulations of MEMS and NEMS, and uncertainty quantification in these systems. Before coming to UCLA, Murthy was the chair of the Department of Mechanical Engineering at the University of Texas at Austin and held the Ernest Cockrell Jr. Memorial Chair in Engineering. She has authored more than 330 technical publications, is an editor of the second edition of the Handbook of Numerical Heat Transfer, and serves on the editorial board of Numerical Heat Transfer and the International Journal of Thermal Sciences. So without further ado, Dr. Jayashree.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Thank you for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. Before I get started, let me say how thrilled I am to see so many women interested in STEM, so many more than when I was a student. And so it's wonderful to see you all here. I want to thank Maggie and all the other UCLA STEM students for organizing this wonderful 3-day conference. I know UCLA students have a lot on their plate, so to take the time and effort to make this happen is really incredible. You've put together a terrific lineup of speakers from academia and industry, and I know they're going to share their insights on different entry points in a STEM career. And I know there'll be something to be learned from every speaker's experience. I want to thank everyone here for participating over the next few days. Events like this have really kept our UCLA community connected during the pandemic. And the timing of this conference really couldn't be better. So you see, this week is UCLA's Graduate and Professional Students Appreciation Week, where we honor the many contributions that graduate and professional students make at UCLA and the surrounding community. And it's also UCLA E-Week, the annual celebration of all things engineering organized by our student organizations. So let's talk about STEM. Right? So many chose the STEM field to discover unknowns from the quantum level to the origins of our universe, to create and build tools that will help society and to improve the quality of life. And it's really this kind of curiosity, the need to know more and to figure out ways to make the human experience better, that's been the core of my own life and my own career choices. I grew up in India, and I was good at math and science in school. And my father, who was an excellent civil engineer, inspired me a great deal in my decision to become an engineer, a mechanical engineer. But I was early to the game. So back then in India, I was one of only 2 women in my entire undergraduate engineering class. And you know, this is still true. This is still true in India and here in the US as well. The number of women in this field is still low, though perhaps not as low as in my time, but it's still pretty low. And you know, being one of very few means that you face a number of obstacles. I would say my biggest obstacles were that I was entering institutions that weren't really ready for women being there. This was, you know, pretty early in the game. So I bet you guys have seen the movie Hidden Figures, and you might remember the scene where Katherine Johnson had to walk half a mile, run half a mile really to use the bathroom. And that's, you know, exactly the kind of thing I experienced as an undergraduate. This was very early in the transition of women into engineering and into the engineering workforce. But it wasn't just the physical infrastructure that was missing. There were other things missing as well. The legal infrastructures were missing, social infrastructures were missing, frameworks were missing. And you know, knowledge is power. And so there are deeply ingrained obstacles to women obtaining knowledge and therefore obtaining power. Right? So, but there's been a transition. Over my lifetime, things have definitely improved. There's no question about that. And today, women in engineering are making a difference, not just to the workplace culture, which of course it's transforming, but we're actually changing the meaning of engineering itself, right? So what counts as engineering? What are important problems for us to work on? What is legitimate engineering knowledge? All of that is changing as more and more women enter the engineering field. And we're seeing more and more women in managerial and leadership roles, and that has a direct impact. It has a direct impact on the next generation of women, young women that I encounter these days, demand a more socially relevant role for themselves, and define success for themselves in a much more socially connected way. And so when I joined UCLA Engineering as dean a little over 5 years ago, I was the first woman to hold that position. I made expanding access to UCLA engineering education as one of my top priorities. And that is why I established a new program called We at UCLA, Women in Engineering at UCLA. And this is designed to support the full participation of women in engineering and computer science. This year, 29% of our engineering school's entire undergraduate enrollment is women, and that is a record for us. And I'm absolutely sure that those numbers will continue to climb. But there can be no doubt that we need to do much more to improve equity and diversity. And there are so many talented young women who do not enter a STEM career because they just don't see enough women in the field. And they worry legitimately that they might be at a disadvantage in industry that has traditionally been dominated by men. So at UCLA, we believe that diversity is an indispensable element of academic excellence, and the Samuel Lee Engineering School is committed to providing a more equitable, diverse, inclusive, and nurturing learning environment for all our students. So we want to build a truly diverse student and faculty body with programs that are designed to complement a rigorous engineering education for anyone with the talent and the desire to succeed. So we want to foster a community rich in diversity that can expand the range of knowledge, experiences, and viewpoints. All of these are critical to finding innovative new solutions to today's pressing societal problems. Now, as the number one public university, we need to invest in deepening relationships with our area community colleges, increasing outreach to underrepresented high schools, middle schools, and easing the transition for transfer students. At the engineering school, this means that we're hiring faculty who are not only excellent in their respective fields, but who also the experience and expertise in mentoring underrepresented students. We're also building pipeline programs to help high schools and middle schools in underserved communities. We want to be sure that they can develop math and science expertise in their students that will enable these students to pursue an education in STEM. And we're looking at ways to bridge gaps by offering free math tutoring and other enrichment activities. We also need to do a thorough examination of our norms and practices, our technologies and systems, ones that may have unintentionally left out groups and put them at a disadvantage or left them out altogether. And so at UCLA Samuel Lee, we are launching a speaker series called Engineering in Action, where we explore topics such as equity in AI and other relevant subjects. Conversations on issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion can at times be difficult, they can be uncomfortable, but they are important because the issues of inclusion and diversity are relevant to all of us, and they center on technology, society, and people. And so I'm very glad to see them taking place all over in our school and across campus. And most importantly, they are being led by our students. And so this past year has really shone a spotlight on the inequities that exist in our country. And unfortunately, as we've seen in recent violent incidents targeting Asians and Pacific Islanders, racism and hate continue to be a part of our daily lives. So when these incidents occur, we must all ask ourselves, what can we do at a personal level and at a community level to ensure the safety of our fellow human beings? I know for many of us in STEM, this isn't our comfort zone, all right? So, but it's something we have to address, and a welcoming and inclusive STEM environment benefits everybody. And so my message to you today is twofold. First, a lot more is possible than you think. Energy matters, imagination matters. Don't assume that the world is stacked against you. You can make a difference. And second, remember that true inclusion is deeper than numbers. What are the technologies and systems that must be re-examined? What new methodologies need to be created and developed in order to make society more diverse, equitable, and inclusive? And as engineers and scientists, we must be a part of finding these solutions to these hard problems. And so remember those whose shoulders we stand on today and pay it forward for all of those who are going to follow in your footsteps and who will continue to break barriers. Because only when we're willing to work together can there be real change and real light at the end of the tunnel. And now it's my distinct honor to introduce a towering figure in our community, a woman who has defied all odds and has shattered the glass ceiling, our own UCLA Nobel laureate superstar, Professor Andrea Ghez. Now, you'd have to be inside a black hole not to know who she is, but let me just say a few words about this truly remarkable woman. Andrea is UCLA's Lauren B. Lightman and Arthur E. Levine Professor of Astrophysics, and she is the director of the Galactic Center Group. For more than 25 years, she's turned her eyes towards the skies and into the heart of our Milky Way galaxy, and she has taken on pioneering research that has led to discovery after discovery about the makeup and inner workings of our universe. Last year, Andrea received the Nobel Prize for, I quote here, for the discovery of a supermassive compact object at the center of our galaxy. Still very much in the prime of her career, Andrea continues her research into black holes and the physics that drive them. If you read the cover story of the latest UCLA magazine, you will find that her journey, especially at the beginning, was filled with many dead ends and roadblocks, but undeterred, she broke through all of these barriers time and time again. I want to share some words by one of her colleagues, Hilton Lewis, who is the director of the W.M. Keck Observatory in Hawaii, where the two largest telescopes in the world are housed, and where Andrea used to visit regularly until she and her team were able to access the telescopes remotely. So here's what he says. Today, Andrea sits at the pinnacle of scientific recognition for her achievements. But as she would be the very first to acknowledge, this triumph represents the combined efforts of so many. But in the end, one person had the idea for the research, one person had the chutzpah to propose it, and one person had the determination, tenacity, and focus to make it happen, undeterred by all who said it was a waste of time. I can't imagine a better person to be the keynote speaker for today's program, Professor Andrea Ghez.
Thanks so much for that lovely introduction. I hoping to share my screen with you to give you a little bit of a sense of my path, my journey, and the science that the Nobel Prize recognizes. So in this presentation, what I hope to do is share the perspective that it's useful in life to check in regularly, to check about what it is that we enjoy, what it is we have passion in life for. Two, how it is that we can expand our horizons beyond what our current experiences are, to figure out what we might enjoy and we don't have the experience to understand. And then, as you just heard, to think about how we can help others on their path to figuring out what gives them fulfillment, how to pay it forward. For me, people often ask, how did I become interested in astrophysics? And of course, the story that we can tell is always a constructed story and is with hindsight. for me, I can pinpoint probably my first understanding of the fascination of space with the early moon landing. The moon landing occurred when I was 4 years old. So the fact that the family legend, that the family lore is that at this point I said I wanted to be the first woman on the moon probably tells you more about my family than me. And evidently the job is still open. But today, my passion is really to explore outer space from the ground rather than going there directly. But this ambitious program really inspired me, and I think a whole generation, to think about the universe, to think about the enormity of the universe. And I have to say, it both fascinated me and terrified me. It was, I think at this point, I realized the scale of the universe, both in space and time, were so much larger than anything we experience as humans, that this would actually keep me up at night. But it really did engage me in thinking about problems that are very difficult for us to understand. What is the beginning of time? What is it? What do we mean by the edge of space? And these today, I really see as a puzzle. So while I think I can tell a story that looks like I knew what I wanted to do since I was age 4, that's simply not accurate, because at the same time, my vision of my future was also that I would grow up to become a ballerina. So I was the quintessential, in some sense, little girl who loved to dance. And I thought I would drop out of school when I was 16 to become a ballerina. Now, along the way, I learned that my talents were not in the physicality of dancing. And I learned to migrate my interest in dance from one of the physical to then thinking about choreography by the time I hit high school, and today to simply being a passion that I have. I love to take advantage of all the performing arts, and in particular the dance that's offered at UCLA. But I see parallels. I see parallels in how one might think about the composition of a dance to how we do research. And of course, how we do research is really one of puzzle solving. And at this point in my development, I also understood that I had a keen interest and aptitude for doing puzzles, for figuring out how to make disparate pieces come together. And for this, I really have to say, my parents were an enormous influence on me, as they are for most people. They shared a passion for education and the arts. For my dad, I learned the joys of figuring out things from a very fundamental level. He and his brother would love to sit around the kitchen table and think through how the ancient Greeks figured out the circumference of a circle. And I think that really left a lasting impression about the joys of curiosity. And from my mother, I learned a similar lesson, but from a very different point of view. While my father was in economics, so very mathematically based field, my mother was in the arts. And what I learned from her was twofold. It was manyfold, but two I want to share with you. One is in the arts, to understand the benefit of looking at things from different perspectives. And today, I really have been fascinated with the similarity between the basic arts and the basic science. That as a scientist, we're continually trying to get the tools to allow us to see the universe from a different perspective. And I guess I fundamentally see the arts as having a lot of the same objectives of forcing us to look at the universe, our society, from a new and different and perhaps challenging perspective. From my mom, I also learned that one could grow tremendously through life. My mom grew up, she says, thinking that nirvana was to grow up and get married and have kids. She had 3 of us, and then she went to work, I think, to save her sanity. And in the beginning, she worked as a secretary in an art gallery. And by the time I was in high school, she was the director of that gallery. So she had, throughout my childhood, an amazing development of her professional self. And I think that was tremendously informative in terms of what one can shoot for, go for, and overcome. Now, the other thing I think my parents taught me in terms of puzzle solving is the benefit of differences. So while in the big picture, my parents were quite similar, there were really many ways in which they were fundamentally different. They, well, my father came from an upper class European Jewish background. He was born in Italy, moved to the US during the war, and then the family went right back. And he spent most of his childhood and young adulthood in Geneva. My mother grew up in a very, very small town, didn't go to college. Her family was blue collar, Catholic. And I think from that, both the similarity and the differences, there was a lot of, certainly a lot of arguing in the house and attempts to resolve these different points of view. And so I think the benefit from having grown up in this environment is that I wasn't afraid of an argument. I wasn't afraid of differences. And today I'm very grateful for that context, to have grown up in a place of a lot of discussion or revolving around trying to resolve different points of view. With this love of puzzles, I went to college, or actually before I go on to that, let me just say I also went to a high school associated with the University of Chicago. That's known, it was founded by John Dewey and known for valuing the educational principle of teach people how to learn, teach people how to ask questions rather than the fundamental facts. It turns out that his grad student came out to UCLA to start the UCLA lab school years ago. So I was really delighted when I had the chance to send my kids to a school that was based on a similar principle of really questioning and curiosity. From there, I went to MIT, and I went as a math major, and I want to point that out because I didn't go as a physicist. I didn't go as an astronomer. I went as a mathematician. And the reason I thought math was so interesting at the time is that I thought it was the language, it was the tools for exploring these ideas about the universe, or ultimately black holes, which I was increasingly finding fascinating. But when I got there and started taking the math for mathematicians, I soon discovered that, in fact, this was not the math that I had envisioned, but rather it was the math and physics, the physics classes that, or I guess I should say that the physics was the language that really appealed to me. But again, while you can tell the story in a very linear way, I think I faced my first year or my second semester in college what many college students face, which is that, oh my goodness, this is not what I thought it was. Now what am I going to do? And I like to joke that I think my second semester in college, I probably changed my major as often as I changed my socks. I came up with all sorts of possible things that I imagined I might do, including becoming a chemist, so I took organic chemistry, or there was a short phase of going through many engineering possibilities, mechanical engineering, aerospace, but really and underlying all of that was physics. So this is how I ended up majoring in physics, and by my sophomore year, picking up research in astrophysics. And at that point, I was completely hooked. I was back to thinking about these things that I found so fascinating when I was a kid, the questions of space and time. And by that point, I had understood that black holes really represented the fundamental limitations of our understanding of how space and time to come together. So that was the origin of my interest, and I got involved in research having to do with how the small black holes come to pass. Now, as so many of you know, college experience is not only what we major in, but also the communities that we become part of. And there were two really important communities that I joined. One was a living situation. At MIT, there's a huge Greek system. So I actually joined a co-ed fraternity. And at MIT, the fraternities are places where you actually live. So I had the real pleasure of living in an environment that was well balanced. So while I was at MIT, the percentage of women was 25%. I had found a living situation which was well balanced, which for me was really important to make sure that my personal life was as balanced as possible, to give me, I don't know what I would say, respite or a balance to a professional world that was not gender balanced. Similarly, I joined the MIT cross-country team. And today I understand how unusual my athletic development was compared to where things are today. I had played field hockey and ran track in high school. And here I joined the MIT cross-country team, having never run cross-country in high school. And that was a blast. I decided, I think because we got the chance to officiate the Boston Marathon, a bunch of us decided that we would run the marathon. And so this community of runners became yet another community that provided really deep friendships and sources of support, which to me is another element that's critical to the potential for taking on really hard and challenging things, is having that system of support that's behind us. By the end of MIT, I decided that not only was I going to be an astrophysicist, but I wanted to do a triathlon. So my senior year at MIT, I joined the swim team. And this is really where I understand life is different today. I can't imagine college students being able to do this, but fortunately, MIT athletics at that time enabled this. And swimming is something I do today, something I didn't grow up with, but it's something that actually ages much better than running. So from MIT, I went to Caltech, out of the frying pan and into the fire, you could say. And at this point in graduate school, we know there's no dorms, there are no co-ed fraternities to provide that social context. So for me, swimming became an even more important part of what provided me with ballast to my continuing interest in physics. I think at this point in the entering class in physics, there were one or two women. And I will never forget going to the first party at Caltech where somebody came up to me and they said, you're the new grad student. And I looked at him and I said, no, I'm a new grad student. But it really, to me, captured what happens when there are so few women. You become you become an object, you become a center of attention in a way that you may not have been used to. And that for me made it really important that I had a community in which I didn't stick out. And so swimming has always provided that for me ever since. At Caltech, I also learned some other important lessons. I learned that, and perhaps it was the sports that helped me understand this. I learned the importance of the ability to change advisors, because again, those who are closest to you are the ones who are really going to influence your future. So I think I changed my advisor twice. So I had 3 advisors, and it's a really important part of graduate training, that ability to really look for the research group that's going to work for you, both from an intellectual point of view, what satisfies your intellectual curiosity, but also a group in which you have mentors who actually support you at a deep and fundamental level. Now, while at the time, I think there were no female Caltech professors in physics, I believe that's true. What I had started to realize, and I think I only realized this after the fact, is that the advisors, the wonderful advisors I had, both as an undergrad and grad student, had daughters my age. So I think it was an important reminder that support can come from unexpected places and for reasons that you don't necessarily understand, but that it's important to understand whether or not you have that support, and to keep working until you find the place that will allow you to thrive. Because I think when we're happy is when we're going to do our best work. Now, the advisor that I finally did settle upon also gave me some great advice, and this is part of the moving out of your comfort zone. I'd gone to Caltech. I think what I feared most at that point in my life is a very common fear, which was public speaking. You could go around a table and ask people to introduce themselves, give them their name, and it would make me nervous. So at that point in my life, I was doing a lot to avoid any being forced to speak publicly. So that included part of the decision to go to Caltech was not only because it was an amazing institution and I thought it would fortify any question that there might be out there that I didn't have the capacity to think at the highest level. I also had the opportunity to go there without having what's known as a teaching assistantship, because I was really afraid of teaching. I was afraid of public speaking. But after I gave my very first lunch talk at Caltech, where I think I shook from my head to my toes, my advisor said, you have to teach. You have to teach because you have to get over your nervousness for public speaking. And that was an important and transformative piece of advice. So one of my favorite sayings today, and I understand now that I've embraced this for a very long time, is that every challenge is an opportunity. So being forced to teach, I decided that at an institution like Caltech, where there are very few women and even fewer in the faculty positions, that it was important for me to teach introductory physics. There was simply no one else at the time at the faculty level doing it. And at Caltech is such a small institution that all the discussion sections are actually taught by the professors. So I embarked on an effort to try to convince Caltech that they should make an exception and allow me to teach freshman physics. I'm so glad I did this for 2 reasons. One, I discovered that I had a true passion for teaching, a true passion for encouraging the next generation, and showing that this field that often has a mystique about it is accessible. It's possible. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be scary. You just need to learn the ropes. And so through this experience, I really did discover that I not only wanted to be a scientist, but I wanted to be a scientist in a university context. And I didn't have that notion today. At Caltech is also known for its really large telescope. So Palomar Observatory, which is just south of Los Angeles. It's between Los Angeles and San Diego. At the time, it was the largest telescope in the world. This is a picture of me in front of this amazing facility my first year in grad school. And it was an amazing experience to understand that having access to these facilities allow you to do research that's just simply not possible with other facilities. So I think at that point, I was learning the lesson of the importance of the tools that we use. Now, I thought I wanted to study black holes. Actually, I knew I wanted to study black holes, and I got excited about a project that was all about developing new techniques for using big telescopes. And the promise was that you could study black holes at the center of galaxies. So I started this, and I really, there was something appealing to the puzzle-loving side of me about developing new tools that would give us new information or new perspective on our universe as a way of moving forward. Now, what I came to learn in graduate school as I pursued this project is that it wasn't ready. It wasn't ready for studying black holes. So at that point, it was a bit of a crisis point of, are you going to pursue the scientific interests, or are you going to pursue the technological approach and change the science focus? And again, this is where one's life it can seem like you're taking a left-hand turn, but in the long run, it allows you better insight in your ultimate goals. So I did decide to change my scientific focus. I decided that the technique offered immense opportunity to get new understanding. And where I focused was on understanding how stars are formed, stars like our sun, and understanding how they're formed, and under what conditions they might form or be born as twins, pairs of stars, and how that would influence the potential for planet formation in these twin stars. So very different from black holes, having to do with star formation and planet formation. And it was a lot of fun to do, but it was really quite different. But throughout this whole time, I found myself paying a lot of attention to the progress in the underlying detector technology, which was what had limited or prevented this technique from studying black holes. From Caltech as a grad student, I then went on to the University of Arizona. I had married somebody from Caltech who was also a scientist. So I discovered what's often referred to as the two-body problem, which is how do you find two jobs in one place? And so, this is, where you also learn the art of compromise and how to maximize. For us, it was maximizing the opportunities for the two of us. And that optimization landed us in Arizona. I was at the University of Arizona, and my partner was at the Arizona State University. Now, I had a very East Coast understanding of small towns. So we decided that our solution to where to live was to live halfway in between, in this little tiny town called Casa Grande, or as the local call it, Casa Grande. it was 70 miles one way to the University of Arizona. This is not the quaint little small town of the East Coast that I had imagined. This was cotton farming community. But we found another couple that was doing the same commute. So we carpooled for a bit. And I came to love books on tape. I chose the University of Arizona because, like Caltech, it was really invested in large telescopes. So at the time, the largest telescope, which was in the Arizona mountains, was called the MMT, for the Multiple Mirror Telescope. So it was really radical new design to increase the diameter of a telescope. So we did this for a year. And while I left Los Angeles thinking, good riddance, because I didn't like commuting. LA was too much traffic. And the irony is that I had a much longer commute than I ever did when I lived in any of my experiences in Los Angeles, either as a grad student or subsequently. I can remember where I was sitting as a postdoc in Arizona when I read the job ad for UCLA. I remember distinctly thinking, this is my dream job, without a doubt. And so I feel so lucky that a year later, I was able to join the faculty at UCLA and dramatically reduce my commute. But that's not why I came to UCLA. I came to UCLA because UC owns the largest telescope in the world, the Keck Observatories. This is located out in Hawaii. And what UCLA, and this was just at the time that this observatory was coming online. This was the early 90s. And what UCLA had done was to recognize that infrared technology was evolving very rapidly and was going to become an important technology for these telescopes. Now, Los Angeles is really good at, has a lot of investment as a business community in that technology, because there's a big aerospace industry in Los Angeles. So UCLA made a really smart decision to invest in faculty who were interested in the development of this technology. And this is the technology that I was interested in watching progress, such that the techniques that I was interested in could actually get to the point of understanding black holes. So there was an interesting coming together of the technology and the telescopes that really opened up the ability to pursue black holes, which had been my original interest when I got to Caltech. Now, before I go on to a bit more about the science, I also want to say a few more words about the other things that I'm very grateful for within UCLA. So as you can see, finding communities has been always an important counterpoint to my professional work, and that doing that through sports has been a theme. And so when I came to UCLA, I joined the UCLA Masters. It's an adult swimming group. I had done this at Caltech. I did it at the University of Arizona. And coming to UCLA, I was really grateful that, in fact, in the year after I started UCLA is when the UCLA swim team opened. And it's been an amazing community of people. It's been a place to meet people who don't necessarily think about science all day long, who come from different parts of the university, be it staff who work in the chancellor's office, to grad students in other departments, to members of just the local Westwood community. So it's a community that I've been really grateful to be part of for the last 25 years. The other part of UCLA that I'm outside my professional world that I'm very grateful for is the community of daycare and school. So UCLA has a daycare system. You can start your kids off from age 2 months old, I think. And then the elementary school allows you to go to 6th grade, and of course today there's even a high school. So this is a picture on the right of my the younger of my 2 boys. At the time when he was just starting the lab school with his best friend at the time, who he had met in the daycare system. And the thing that I'm so grateful for about UCLA's investment in daycare and primary school is multifold. One is it provides great care for your kids with professionals who can help you become a more educated parent in the world of parenting. And it does so in a way that's on campus, which facilitates the balancing act or the juggling act of being a parent and being a professional. But it also introduces you to a community within UCLA that is learning to do the same thing. And I chose this picture in particular because the child on the left is the child of another UCLA leader. And I would not have met his dad had it not been for this daycare. So I think the daycare connects UCLA as a very big institution in really interesting ways across disciplines in ways that are hard to achieve. You have to go pick up your kid every day. It's something that you have in common. And I found myself learning a lot about leadership, about how the university works from my fellow parents who became dean of the law school, who became vice chancellor for EDI. I mean, all sorts of interesting positions within the university. So I think it's one of UCLA's, I think, secret weapons to creating community within a very, very large context. All right. So with that, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a sense of the kind of work that I do. I did come to UCLA wanting to use these big telescopes, and I was interested in developing them, new techniques for using these big telescopes to get the sharpest images possible ever achieved from ground or space. And specifically with the intent of understanding black holes. And at this point, at the beginning of when I arrived, this was in 1994, and I was interested in and thought and really believed that the technology was at the point where we could ask the question, is there a supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy? And as Dean Murthy also already mentioned, at the time, my first proposal was turned down. So that's a hard way to start a faculty position, which is when an idea that you've been fostering and nurturing, and you're convinced that this is the moment it's actually going to work, to have it turned down. But I think, as I said, there's really something to be embraced about every challenge as an opportunity. And this is also where I think the things that we learn from overcoming earlier adversity really helps us. At this point in my career, I've certainly spent enough time hearing, 1 or 2 people saying, you can't do this because you're a girl. Either it was going to MIT or going to Caltech, that I was pretty used to hearing, we don't believe you can do this, and proving people wrong. So I don't think I gave it too much of a thought, because I had really had a lot of I had a lot of work on developing that muscle of overcoming people's disbelief. And what it forced me to do was A, write a better proposal, and B, understand that I had to convince a community within the University of California, because this is a telescope that's owned by the University of California. So I really had to go well beyond UCLA that believed this. My colleagues believed it was possible. They had hired me, but I had to convince the other people in astrophysics up and down the UC system that this was possible. So that forced me to go on a lecture tour to get to know my community better, to convince them that this was indeed a feasible experiment. And of course, in doing that, I came to a much better understanding of why people were skeptical. So, the benefit of talking and understanding why people don't agree with you, you can get to a point of writing a more effective proposal. Now, when you want to study black holes, an effective question to ask is, how do you observe something you can't see? Because black holes are objects whose pull of gravity is so intense that nothing can escape it, not even light. So you can't see it directly. And the way we're going to do this is by watching how objects move under the influence of gravity to prove that there's a lot of mass inside a small volume. And the reason that's important is that it's when mass becomes confined to a small enough volume, gravity overcomes all other known forces and forces that object to become the infinitesimally small object known as a black hole. Okay, so the radius at which you have to confine that mass to is known as the Schwarzschild radius, or the event horizon. So the job is show a lot of mass is inside a small volume. This is known as the event horizon. It's the last point at which you can get any light from. Light can escape from the object. It's also the point at which space and time become so mixed that they in fact invert their definition. So all sorts of crazy, conceptually difficult and wild things happen, which really gives you a sense for why my original, you might be able to tell narrative about interest in space and time, leading one to think that black holes are interesting objects to study. Now, black holes show up in two places, or we talk about black holes in two parts of the universe. One is they were predicted to be small black holes, and that was predicted by theory. But the ones that I'm interested in are the supermassive black holes, which are thought to be at the center of galaxies. So the galaxy is here, and what you see is huge amount of energy coming out from the core of the galaxy. So that these crazy jets are what made people think about supermassive black holes, which are 1 million to 1 billion times the mass of the sun. And this idea was put forward about 50 years ago, but there was really no evidence, no clear evidence. It was a possibility, but the evidence really wasn't there. And at the time, it also became clear that perhaps we should be thinking about supermassive black holes not only in these crazy galaxies that emit a lot of energy, which is only 10% of all galaxies, but in all galaxies. And our galaxy is a quiet, ordinary, garden variety galaxy that would look very much like this one if we could get out and look back. So galaxies are flattened disk-like structures. There are spiral arms, which is where star formation is happening. And I'm going to make that connection to star formation in a second. Black hole happens in the middle. You can think of where our sun is, like being in the suburbs. Things are calm, low density. And as you go downtown to the center of the galaxy, things get much more crowded, much more busy, much more energetic. Everything becomes more extreme as you go to the center of a galaxy. So this is where we think the supermassive black hole resides, or in any galaxy, that it resides at the heart of the galaxy. And in our galaxy, if we go to a quiet, dark place, you might be able to see the plane of the galaxy, which is what we see here. So we're looking towards the center look for this black hole. And as I said, we want to watch how stars orbit under the gravitational influence. So the key is to see the stars that are as close to the center as possible, because these stars, each star tells you the mass that's inside its orbit. Pardon me. This tells you why I was interested in Keck. The Keck telescopes. The larger the telescope is, in principle, the smaller the detail that you can see. That's in principle. So these telescopes are characterized by the diameter of the mirror. And this mirror is about the width of a tennis court. So in principle, you should be able to get really small images. But the challenge is the Earth's atmosphere. The Earth's atmosphere is great for us. It allows us to survive here on Earth, but it is a total headache for astrophysicists trying to understand the universe. So what I've spent a lot of my career doing is developing ways of overcoming the blurring effects of the Earth's atmosphere. And this is technology that has undergone immense improvements over the last 3 decades. And this animation just gives you a sense that without these technologies, you can't see what's going on at the center of the galaxy. And with them, you can. So in the evolution that I referred to during graduate school, this technology was not ready to look at the center of the galaxy, never mind any other galaxy. But our galaxy now, with the detector technology being there, and with the what I'm going to call high resolution imaging techniques, which allow us to compensate for the distortions in the Earth's atmosphere, we can now get rid of that blurring effect and see what's going on. We can see the stars. So this is what the group that didn't believe in our work said. They said this technique wouldn't work. Even if it did, we wouldn't see stars. And even if we could see stars, we wouldn't be able to see them move. So I love watching this movie. This is now a fourth of the real estate of that little inset, and it shows how these stars have moved over the last 25 years. And I just also want to point out that I proposed this work thinking that I was going to do this for 3 years. And here I am, 26 years later, still working on this program. It's not that it took longer, it's just the scientific potential has grown as the technology has improved. So what we did in the first 3 years was what we thought we were going to do, and then we realized that there was so much more that could be done. So you can probably find my favorite star in the universe. Its name is S02. Probably needs a better name, but it's the one that goes around in 16 years and is the best, provides the best evidence today that there is a supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy. In fact, we now know from the orbit of this star that there's 4 million times the mass of the sun inside a scale that corresponds to the size of our solar system. So this is a volume that's a factor of 10 million times smaller. And this is what's moved the case for a supermassive black hole from a possibility, which is where we began, to a certainty, because we've increased the evidence by a factor of 10 million. I mean, think about anything that you might want to increase by some amount, say your salary. Think about the impact if you could increase it by a factor of 10 million. And that's what's happened here within our own galaxy. The first 3 years allowed us to do the first factor of 1,000. And that was just measuring the little arcs of stars, the speeds. But getting to the point of measuring pure orbits got us the next factor of 10,000. All right, so today we're no longer interested in measuring whether or not there's a supermassive black hole, but rather understanding the environment. We now have an amazing laboratory for understanding both the physics of black holes, how does gravity work near a supermassive black hole, as well as how do black holes shape the galaxy in which they reside. And I'll just leave you with the thought that, in fact, this is an arena where we've demonstrated we've not only solved the question that we set off to answer, but we've discovered more questions than answers. Almost everything you can predict about what you should find near the black hole has been inconsistent with our observations, which from a scientific perspective is just amazing fodder for future research. So let me end by saying it's been an amazing journey. I feel very privileged to be able to be in the field of astrophysics and to have had the opportunities to allow me to get me where I am. But I really, I understand that supportive communities are an essential aspect of that. So I encourage you all to regularly ask yourselves, what is it that you enjoy? How can you expand your knowledge of what you enjoy? And how can you help others discover their own path in life? Thanks for your attention.
Well, we just want to thank you for that amazing keynote address. I know personally the planning committee in the back was like, what an icon, like goals for us in grad school. So we were very excited to hear about your journey from beginning to end. Yeah, the comments are flooding in. I don't know if you have a few minutes to take any questions that might come in, / if the audience has any questions that they might want to ask. Oh yeah, no. See, everyone's like, look how amazing. But if anybody does have any questions and wants to write it in the chat, I'm trying to keep an eye out, but you know, your well-wishers are just like flooding it in here.
So in the Q&A, I see one. It says, do you have any advice for students who didn't get into grad school this round? Actually, I do have advice, which is don't let that stop you. So in fact, one of the things that I find myself doing more and more is supporting students with what's known as a post-bac. So it's bac meaning baccalaureate, so post-BS. So I've hired students for a year to help them with that transition. In other words, they tried, and for whatever reason, they are not on the path that they want to be. And to give them that opportunity to develop a skill set that will help them get to where they want to go. Now, I guess the advice I would give more generally is take the year. Take the year to figure out what is the path that you really want to be on. Is it that, is it going to grad school in the field that you've picked? Do a more careful study of the kinds of grad schools that are out there, because unlike college, where what am I trying to say? Grad schools can specialize and be really great, even if the overall department has a mediocre ranking. There can be some subspecialty that puts them at the top of the game. So in other words, if you have to know more specifically, although I wouldn't advise going there and saying, this is the only thing I want to do. I guess the advice would be take the year to have some new experiences and develop your understanding of where you want to go. Like, see this as an opportunity, because so rarely do we get an opportunity to pause in that journey. So I guess that's my piece of advice there.
I would say that's a great piece. I wish somebody had told me that when I was applying to grad school. This is a super popular question that we have in here. Somebody said academia seems to offer less and less opportunities for tenure track positions. They're hard to get nowadays. Is there any advice for people who want to start a tenure track position?
I guess my overall advice is, figure out where you want to go. And figure out what your strengths are. I'd say when you can bring an authentic interest and have a really good understanding of not only what are your strengths, but what are the matches. So every institution is not great at everything. So how do various institutions match up both with the kind of academic tenure track you want to be on? Academia, it's sort of funny. Academia is actually a pretty big and rich path. Not all institutions are alike. I mean, fundamentally, there are the research universities, which are quite different from the liberal arts colleges. So, first understanding what is that ratio of teaching to research that is particularly appealing to you. And then what is the kind of institution that is appealing to you? Now, I'll say I came to UCLA because I wanted access. I mean, really, really wanted to do work at Keck. And I thought UCLA had this brilliant approach. I had never been at a public institution before I came to UCLA. So that surprised, so I have to say, for me, I have come to love the mission of a public university. It took me a long time to really understand and embrace in a deeply professional way the benefits of working at an institution like UCLA compared to working at a place like Caltech, MIT. And the older I get, the more important I feel that it is to work at this kind of institution. So I don't know if that's the advice.
I think so. I feel like you've answered.
Let's turn up your interest and go for what you want.
We actually have a question from a planning committee member that it seems like everyone's trying to push up to the top, and says, was there ever a moment in your STEM journey where you felt like maybe this isn't for me or it's not worth it anymore? And how did you get through it?
Oh God, I guess, was there one? There were many. I think it's if you're gonna go for it in life. I mean, look, in life generally, we all hit speed bumps. It's just part of life, and it's also part of what enables us to grow. Because if we don't hit any rough spots, we don't grow. But there were plenty of rough spots that forced me to dig deep. Probably the roughest spot was in grad school. And the reason I think it was roughest is that earlier in your career, we have grades to bolster our confidence that we're good at what we're doing. It's feedback. It's you have a grade. But once you get into grad school, the first 2 years, at least in a physics PhD, is classwork. And then you move into this less well-defined adventure of research, which takes a long time, and you're much more dependent on what people have to say about you. So if you encounter people all the time who make stupid comments. It's just the nature of human beings. I think the challenge in grad school is to develop the confidence, some other source of confidence, because you no longer have grades to tell you that person is wrong. So I think for me, there was some professor who told me he didn't think I would ever pass comps, my comprehensive exams. All out discouraging. How did I deal with it? Spent a lot of time swimming. And, just determined to pass the comps, like to prove him wrong. And that's when I changed my advisor. Oh, I should have said that was my advisor at the time. So I took that as a big red flag, time to change your advisor. So I guess that would be how did I deal with it was, yeah. So changing your advisor is super important in grad school if it's not working out. And unfortunately, I think it's actually one of the hardest things for grad students to do. Just because you have to say, I'm going to move from here to here. And there's not always the structure to allow you to do that smoothly, but it's really important. And I strongly advise grad students to feel, I think most grad schools understand that. That doesn't make it an easy.
I was going to say, I felt that when you said swimming, I like saw the people's things going up saying like, yes, a whole bunch of grad students I know are like very avid swimmers.
Or running or anything to clear your head, like get outside yourself.
You can ask my parents. I was super stressed last year, so I was like, I'm going to run the marathon. It's like lots of running. So definitely works. Highly recommend. So we have somebody asking, do you have any advice for a female PhD student who is considering a career in academia, but feels like it'll be more easy or maybe it'll be more comfortable to make a family in a different field? Yeah.
Oh gosh. I actually think academia is a really amazing place to have a family because look, one of the it's both one of the benefits but also challenges of academia in the research realm is no one's telling you what to do. You have to be totally self-motivated, but it also means that there's a lot of flexibility. So when your kid's sick, unless you're teaching a class that moment, you can go home. You just have to work another day. That's hard. So I think it's almost like the lack of boundaries is both the strength and the weakness of academia. So I have to say, I found raising kids as a professor just an amazing experience, and I'm so grateful for I'll reiterate this for the daycare, because there were a bunch of other faculty that you meet that are trying to figure out how to do this job. Like, how do you do this particular job and have kids? So you learn a lot. I learned crazy. Here are just a few things I learned that are so simple and yet so lovely. I have to travel a lot for my job, not during COVID, but generally it's just part of the job. And I love traveling, but when you have kids that are little, it's a constant battle to figure out, well, how do you do this without feeling like you failed your kids? So I learned two things. One, put big Lego blocks on the mantelpiece for every day you're gone. Like, teach your kids. It was like, okay, let's teach them how to count and that you're coming back, and put chocolate underneath so that there's motivation. And then I learned that when I came back, that it was worth picking them up early from school or daycare, and we called it catch-up time. It was just time for us to catch up because I had been gone, and we got into the habit of making cookies. And I have two teenage boys who to this day love making cookies. My son, who's now a sophomore in college, he comes home and one of the first things he often wants to do is, let's make cookies. It's like this connection thing. So yeah, I've learned a lot, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for having had that opportunity to, just to see life through a different lens of being a parent. I think you also learn a lot of good management skills. Working with a lot of students and colleagues often benefit from the things you learn about well, how do you deal with kids that aren't getting along, kids that are having temper tantrums, kids that don't want to, who are learning the rules of the road. So I think there's been tremendous synergy, in fact, of what I've learned.
I like the little Lego block thing. I was gonna say that's a cute thing to learn and do with your kids. All right, let me scroll through. We got a few more that came in while we were talking. It said, all right, here's the next top one. If you hadn't gone to MIT or Caltech, do you think it would have made a difference in your passion for astrophysics? And how important of a role does a specific college make?
The passion piece? No. I think the passion piece is I think you can develop your passions no matter where you go, because that's really about understanding what you like. Like, what do you like spending your time doing? Like, it's almost like it's very similar to saying, like, what friends do you like? Like, spend time with this person? Don't like that so much. Spend time with that person? That's more fun. So it's kind of the same. So I don't think the institution drives that. I do often tell my grad students or prospective grad students that there are a lot of great places out there of all ilks, and sometimes there's something to be said for figuring out what that institution is good at, like taking advantage of the opportunities that are in front of you. And not trying to make the institution something that it's not, like understanding that each institution also has strengths.
I think that's a good point. Take note. So then somebody asked, do you have advice for students who are dealing with low-key sexism from advisors or collaborators, fellow grad students, and students in general?
Yeah, find a community where you're not a minority. I'll actually, and well, this piece of advice I've learned. So when I was a first-year grad student, I think I went to a couple of conferences where there were a couple of senior guys that asked me out to dinner. Now, I'm smart enough to know that for saying, oh, I'm really interested in your work, let's go out to dinner. And I'm smart enough to know that a first-year grad student doesn't have a lot to say. So I came back from these conferences just annoyed. And a woman who I would say was she was a second mentor to me, in addition to my formal advisor. She was a research scientist at the time, Anila Sargent. She gave me this great piece of advice. She said, look, when you give a talk, they're too busy looking at your legs. Make it lunch. Bring your preprints, because that's what you did in those days, and make sure they never forget what you work on. And I thought that was a great piece of advice, because it sort of moved the situation from being professionally inappropriate to one that's professionally appropriate, and take advantage of this you get attention, so bring that attention to the place where it's appropriate. And so that was when I was a first-year grad student. And then when I was professor at UCLA, I had my second kid, the one who was in the picture. And I was trying to get a daycare spot, and I didn't get a daycare spot. And I was so pissed. I had just gotten into the National Academy of Sciences, and I couldn't get daycare at UCLA. And I went into my colleague's office, somebody who just has given me great advice over the years, Mike Jura. And he just gave me an amazing piece of advice, which at its heart is the same. It's actually the same piece of advice. He said, look, write the angry letter, tear it up, and then help people do their jobs better. And if you think about it, it's the same, like help people do their jobs better. Like it's a little bit, have empathy for others, like people make mistakes or do things they might not, shouldn't. But empower yourself rather than playing the victim. Take charge of the situation and help and decide where you want it to go and do something that's proactive for getting there. And I've really today, that's why I really love this expression. I mean, the older I get, the more I appreciate it. That every challenge is an opportunity. Sometimes you have to think a little harder.
Well, I'm looking at the time, and it looks like we are actually almost at time. So I do want to say thank you again. Honestly, this was an incredible keynote. I know clearly everybody really enjoyed it, as you could see from the flooding of messages in the chat. And the advice that you gave at the end, really, I know I'll be taking some of those pieces as I move through the rest of my grad school experience. But just honestly, thank you again for making time for us today. Of course. So as it's now 10 o'clock, I will say that the keynote address is sadly over. Now, if you would like to join us at our Exploring Careers in STEM panel, you can head over to the Sessions tab of the browser. So it should be on your left-hand side, just under the stage button. It should say Sessions, and you can enter into the sessions by just clicking on whichever session you want to join. At the moment, the only one that's going on right now is the Exploring Careers in STEM panel. So we hope to see you all there.